Welcome back to Calm Coding. You know I love a good deep dive. And, well, today we've got a whole stack of cybersecurity news.
Some of it's a little alarming.
Yeah, we're talking breaches, vulnerabilities, even a company that accidentally exposed their own user data.
It's never a dull moment.
It really isn't. So buckle up, everybody. First up, we've got a story that might make you think twice about buying gift cards online.
Yeah.
A company called MyGiftCardSupply, pretty popular site for buying and selling gift cards. They had a major security lapse.
Yeah, and they were storing a lot more than just names and emails.
Oh, really?
Driver's licenses, passports,
Right.
even selfies in an unprotected database on Azure.
Wow. They're asking for a lot more than they need for a simple gift card transaction, right?
It does seem excessive, and it kind of speaks to a larger trend of data overcollection.
Oh, interesting.
Companies are gathering far more information than they need often without really assessing the risks.
And so it's a potential goldmine for cybercriminals, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Huge liability for these companies. What happens now for the users whose data was exposed?
Well, that's the scary part. This kind of data, incredibly valuable on the dark web.
Yeah.
Identity theft, phishing scams, opening fraudulent accounts. I mean, it's a real nightmare scenario.
Oh, man. And this case also highlights the connection between gift cards and online scams, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, gift cards are often used in scams because they're difficult to trace.
Yeah, cybercriminals love gift cards. I
Yeah.
mean, they can quickly convert stolen funds, especially cryptocurrency, into gift cards.
Right.
Makes it much harder for authorities to follow the money trail.
It all makes sense now. So this mandatory know your customer process, or KYC,
Right.
that MyGiftCardSupply had in place, it seems like it kind of backfired.
It did in a way. I mean, they were collecting all this sensitive data to verify identities and prevent fraud, but then they weren't protecting that data adequately.
Yeah.
It's a cautionary tale for sure.
For sure, a reminder that we need to be careful about who we trust with our data, even seemingly reputable companies.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. We've got some news from the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, about critical flaws found in Oracle and Mitel systems.
These flaws are what we call actively being exploited,
Oh.
which means that hackers are already using them to gain access to systems. It's a perfect example of why staying on top of those security updates is so important.
It's like leaving your front door wide open, right?
Exactly.
So let's break this down. What exactly are these vulnerabilities and what kind of damage can they cause?
Well, the two vulnerabilities found in Mitel's MiCollab platform, they're known as path traversal vulnerabilities.
Okay.
Essentially, hackers can exploit weaknesses in the software's file system to access sensitive information or execute commands.
So they're basically sneaking in through a back door.
That's a good way to put it.
And what about Oracle?
The flaw in Oracle WebLogic server is even more serious, allows remote code execution, meaning attackers can run malicious code on affected servers.
So they could potentially gain complete control of the system.
Potentially, yes.
Okay, so this is serious stuff. We're talking about systems used by businesses, governments, critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
This isn't just your personal computer at risk here.
Exactly. And the impact of a successful attack could be devastating, disrupted operations, data leaks,
Wow.
even the complete shutdown of critical services.
That paints a pretty alarming picture. So what's being done to address these vulnerabilities?
Thankfully, both Oracle and Mitel have released patches to fix these flaws, and CISA has also issued an urgent warning to federal agencies to update their systems immediately.
Okay, so the message here is loud and clear: update, update, update.
Yes.
All right, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about CrowdStrike.
Yeah.
Remember that massive IT outage back in July 2024?
Yeah.
Turns out CrowdStrike, a leading cybersecurity firm, was right in the middle of it.
It was a pretty ironic situation. A defective software update from a cybersecurity company triggered one of the largest IT outages in history.
Wow.
Millions of Windows servers were impacted, and even thousands of flights were grounded.
This really highlights how even the companies we rely on for protection can make mistakes with huge consequences.
It does, and it raises some important questions about corporate accountability in the cybersecurity world. What kind of safeguards need to be in place to prevent this from happening again?
Yeah.
What are the ethical implications of such a widespread outage?
Those are tough questions. Speaking of accountability, a recurring theme in our source material is the alleged activity of Chinese hacking groups.
Right.
We've got several instances to dive into here. Let's start with Volt Typhoon. They're suspected of targeting Guam's power infrastructure. which is pretty concerning.
Absolutely. And what's even more worrisome is that they're believed to be building capacity to disrupt critical U.S. services in the event of a major conflict.
So Guam being a U.S. territory and strategically important, what are the potential implications if these attacks were to be successful?
Well, it could be devastating. Disrupting Guam's power grid could paralyze the island's economy communications.
Wow.
And even military operations, we could be looking at widespread panic and chaos.
It's like a real-life cyber warfare scenario. Is there any consensus on how serious this threat actually is?
Well, honestly, it's a mixed bag. Some experts believe Volt Typhoon poses a serious and immediate threat, while others argue that the risks are being overblown.
So is this a genuine threat or political maneuvering?
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
On the one hand, it's crucial to take these threats seriously and be prepared. But on the other hand, we don't want to fuel unnecessary fear and panic.
Right. Finding that balance is crucial.
Absolutely. Let's move on to another Chinese hacking group, Flax Typhoon. The U.S. Treasury Department recently sanctioned a Chinese cybersecurity firm, Integrity Technology Group, for allegedly aiding Flax Typhoon in their cyber espionage campaigns. This is where things get really murky. It seems like the lines between cybersecurity and state-sponsored hacking are getting blurred.
Absolutely. On the surface, Integrity Technology Group looks like a legitimate cybersecurity company, but the U.S. government alleges they've been secretly providing support and resources to Flax Typhoon, a group known for targeting Western entities. So they're saying that this company is essentially a front for Chinese intelligence. What's been the response from China?
Predictably, they've denied any involvement and criticized the sanctions.
Right.
They claim to be committed to cracking down on cyberattacks regardless of where they originate.
It's a classic he said, she said scenario.
It is.
It seems like these incidents involving Chinese hacking groups are only going to become more frequent and more sophisticated in the future.
I think that's a safe bet. Cybersecurity is a constantly evolving landscape, and nation-state actors are becoming increasingly bold and sophisticated in their tactics.
And that brings us to Salt Typhoon. This group is suspected of infiltrating major U.S. telecom providers like AT&T and Verizon.
Right.
This is concerning because these companies hold a treasure trove of sensitive data.
Oh, you're not kidding. We're talking about customer information, call records, internet traffic. It's a goldmine for anyone looking to spy on or disrupt communications.
So what might their motives be for targeting these companies? Is it espionage, sabotage, or something else entirely?
It's hard to say for sure. It could be any or all of those things. Nation-state actors often engage in cyber espionage to gather intelligence.
Right.
But they can also use cyberattacks to disrupt services or even cripple infrastructure.
It's a chilling thought.
Yeah.
What can these telecom companies do to protect themselves against such sophisticated attacks?
Well, it's a constant arms race. They need to implement robust security measures like multi-factor authentication, intrusion detection systems, regular security audits. But they also need to be proactive, constantly monitoring their networks for any sign of suspicious activity.
So they need to be one step ahead of the attackers at all times.
Pretty much.
And that brings us to our final example of alleged Chinese hacking activity, MirrorFace. They've been targeting Japanese infrastructure and government agencies and individuals for years.
That's right. And they're not just messing around. Their primary goal appears to be stealing sensitive data, including national security secrets and intellectual property.
What makes MirrorFace's tactics stand out from the others?
Well, they're masters of social engineering, specifically spear phishing, to trick their victims into giving up their credentials or downloading malware.
Can you explain what spear phishing is for our listeners who might not be familiar with the term?
Sure. Imagine getting an email that looks like it's from your boss or a trusted colleague.
All right.
It might ask you to click on a link or open an attachment, but in reality, it's a trap set by hackers that's spear phishing.
Sounds like a personalized phishing attack designed to trick specific individuals. That's scary because it preys on our trust in the people we work with.
Exactly, and it's very effective. Spear phishing attacks are responsible for a large percentage of successful cyber attacks.
So how do we protect ourselves from falling victim to these kinds of attacks?
The key is vigilance. Always be cautious about emails, especially those containing links or attachments.
Okay.
Double-check the sender's address. Be wary of unexpected requests for information.
Yeah.
And never click on a link unless you're absolutely sure it's safe.
Good advice.
Yeah.
And this case with MirrorFace highlights the fact that no country is immune to these types of attacks. Cybersecurity is truly a global issue.
It really is. We need to move beyond this idea of national borders when it comes to cybersecurity. We need global cooperation, information sharing, and a united front against these threats.
Well said. Now let's move on to a few other noteworthy security incidents that caught our attention. First up, we have a vulnerability that was discovered in Nuclei, which is a popular open-source vulnerability scanner.
This is a classic example of how even the tools designed to protect us can have security flaws. The bug found in Nuclei could have allowed malicious code to be executed, potentially giving attackers control over the systems being scanned.
Talk about irony. A tool meant to find vulnerabilities ends up being vulnerable itself.
It happens more often than you might think. No software is perfect, and it's crucial to stay vigilant about updating all software, including security tools.
It's like a never-ending game of cat and mouse. Speaking of updates, always be careful about where you get your apps from. Our next story involves a malicious Android app disguised as Telegram Premium.
This is a common tactic used by cybercriminals. They create fake versions of popular apps and spread them through third-party app stores or phishing websites. Once installed, these apps can wreak havoc, stealing your login credentials, financial information, or even spying on you.
So stick to official sources like the Google Play Store or Apple App Store, right?
Absolutely. And don't just blindly install apps.
Yeah.
Read the reviews, check the developer information, and trust your instincts. If something seems fishy, it probably is.
Good advice. Okay, our final story for this part of our deep dive takes us to the legal realm.
Yeah.
It involves T-Mobile and a data breach lawsuit.
Right. The state of Washington is suing T-Mobile over a 2021 data breach that exposed millions of customers' data. The lawsuit alleges that T-Mobile failed to adequately protect this information and didn't properly notify those affected.
So it seems like companies are being held increasingly accountable for cybersecurity failures these days.
Absolutely. Regulators and consumers are no longer willing to tolerate negligence when it comes to protecting personal information. This case could set a precedent for future litigation.
It's a wake-up call for companies to take data security seriously and implement strong safeguards to protect their customers' information.
I agree. This case highlights that cybersecurity isn't just a technical issue, it's also a legal and ethical one.
Yeah.
And the consequences of failing to protect data can be significant.
Well, folks, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. From unprotected databases to exploited vulnerabilities and malicious apps, it seems like the digital world is full of potential pitfalls.
It's a wild west out there.
It is. But the good news is that by staying informed, being cautious, and following best practices, you can significantly reduce your risk.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, and the more you understand about these threats, the better equipped you'll be to protect yourself. We'll be back in a moment to dive even deeper into these issues and discuss some practical tips for staying safe online. Stay tuned.
Sounds good. Welcome back to Calm Coding.
Yeah.
Let's delve a little deeper into the practical steps you can take to enhance your cybersecurity.
Right. It's not enough to just be aware of the threats. We need to know what to actually do to protect ourselves. So what are some essential cybersecurity tips that our listeners should keep in mind?
Well, first and foremost, be mindful of the information that you share online. Think before you post.
Yep.
Is this something you'd be comfortable sharing with the whole world?
Right.
And be especially cautious when it comes to sensitive data like your social security number or financial information. Don't share that unless it's absolutely necessary.
It's like the old saying, think before you speak, but for the digital age.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now let's talk passwords. You've probably heard this a million times, but using strong and unique passwords for all your accounts is absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
And I mean, unique, don't fall into the trap of reusing the same password across multiple platforms. You know, if one account gets compromised, they're all compromised.
Yeah. Right. So how do you keep track of all those complicated passwords?
Yeah.
I can barely remember what I had for breakfast.
That's where a password manager comes in handy. It's like a digital vault for your passwords. It generates and stores all those complex passwords, so you only need to remember one master password. Takes a huge load off your shoulders.
Okay, password managers, got it.
Yeah.
What about antivirus software? Is that still a thing?
Absolutely. A good antivirus program is like having a security guard for your computer. It constantly scans for and blocks malicious software, helps keep your system clean and safe. And just like any software, keep it updated.
Okay.
New threats are emerging all the time, and updates help your antivirus stay ahead of the game.
So regular software updates are a must for cybersecurity.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll admit I'm guilty of ignoring those sometimes.
I think we're all guilty of that from time to time, but those updates often contain critical security patches that fix vulnerabilities that hackers could exploit.
Right.
Don't delay update today.
Okay, noted. Now, I've heard a lot about firewalls.
Mm-hmm.
Are those really necessary?
Firewalls are like the gatekeepers of your network. They act as a barrier between your device or network and the outside world, blocking any unwanted or suspicious traffic.
Yeah.
Having both a software firewall, which is usually built into your operating system, and a hardware firewall, often part of your router,
Right.
adds an extra layer of protection. Think of it as a defense-in-depth strategy.
So it's like having a double lock on your door.
Exactly.
All right, now let's talk about phishing, which seems to be a growing problem these days.
Oh, phishing attacks are becoming increasingly sophisticated. Hackers are getting really good at crafting emails and messages that look legitimate,
Yeah.
but in reality, they're designed to trick you into giving up sensitive information or downloading malware.
So how can we avoid falling for these scams?
Be skeptical if you get an email or message that seems too good to be true. It probably is. Don't click on any links or open any attachments unless you're absolutely sure of the sender. And always double check the sender's email address to make sure it's legit.
Right.
Hover your mouse over the link before clicking it. It should display the actual URL.
Right.
If anything seems fishy, trust your instincts.
It's better to be safe than sorry, right?
Exactly. And remember, legitimate organizations, especially banks or financial institutions, will never ask for your passwords or other sensitive information via email. If you receive such a request, that's a red flag.
That's good advice. So think before you click verify the sender and never share sensitive information unless you're absolutely sure it's safe.
Got it. Now, what about public Wi-Fi? I use it all the time at coffee shops and airports. Is it safe?
Public Wi-Fi networks can be risky because they're often unsecured. That means that anyone on that network could potentially intercept your data if you're going to use public Wi-Fi. I highly recommend using a VPN or virtual private network.
Okay, so a VPN acts like a tunnel, encrypting your internet traffic and making it much harder for snoopers to see what you're doing, right? Precisely. It's like having your own private network within the public network.
Gotcha. Okay. VPNs are on my to-do list now.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other essential cybersecurity tips you'd like to share with our listeners?
One final tip that's often overlooked: back up your data regularly. If your computer gets hit with ransomware or crashes, having a backup could save you a major headache.
Right.
You can use external hard drives, cloud storage, or a combination of both. It's like having an insurance policy for your data.
That's a great point. It's something we should all be doing regardless of our technical expertise. So to recap, the key takeaways for our listeners are: be mindful of what you share online, use strong and unique passwords, keep your software updated,
Yes.
be wary of phishing scams, use a VPN on public Wi-Fi, and back up your data regularly.
You got it. Those are the fundamental steps to staying safe in the digital world. It might seem like a lot, but trust me, it's worth the effort.
It's all about building those good cybersecurity habits. Now, before we move on to our final thoughts, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the human element in cybersecurity. It seems like even with all the technology and safeguards, human error is still a major factor in a lot of these attacks.
It's true. You can have the most sophisticated security system in the world, but if someone clicks on a phishing link or uses a weak password, it can all be for nothing. Humans are often the weakest link.
So what can we do to address this? How do we make ourselves less vulnerable to these social engineering tactics?
Well, it all comes down to awareness and education. We need to be more mindful of our online behavior and make cybersecurity a priority not just for IT professionals, but for everyone.
It's like learning to be a defensive driver. You need to be aware of your surroundings, anticipate potential threats, and know how to react in a dangerous situation.
Exactly. And just like learning to drive, it takes practice and repetition to build those good cybersecurity habits.
So it's not just about installing software or following a checklist. It's about developing a cybersecurity mindset.
You hit the nail on the head. We need to move beyond thinking of cybersecurity as purely a technical issue. It's also about human psychology, awareness, and behavior. Right. We need to be smart, vigilant, and proactive in protecting ourselves and our data.
And we need to start having these conversations not just in the tech world, but everywhere. Cybersecurity is a societal issue that impacts all of us.
I couldn't agree more. Cybersecurity needs to be part of the public discourse.
Yeah.
We need to be talking about it in our schools, our workplaces, and our homes.
We need to create a culture of cybersecurity where everyone understands the risks and takes responsibility for protecting themselves and those around them. Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today. I think our listeners now have a much better understanding of the threats out there and what they can do to stay safe online. We'll be back in a moment to wrap up this deep dive with some final thoughts and insights. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Calm Coding for the final part of our cybersecurity deep dive.
We've covered a lot of ground, but before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on something we discussed earlier: The blurring of lines between cybersecurity and state-sponsored hacking. It's a
Yeah.
topic that deserves a little more attention.
You're right. It's a bit of a rabbit hole,
Yeah.
but an important one, as we saw with the Flax Typhoon case. Governments are increasingly using cybersecurity firms as proxies for their cyber operations.
Yeah.
It's like a new kind of Cold War fought in the shadows of the digital world.
Exactly. And it raises a whole host of ethical and legal dilemmas. On the one hand, these firms are providing valuable services to protect businesses and individuals from cyber threats.
Right.
But on the other hand, they're being used to conduct espionage and potentially even launch attacks on behalf of governments.
It's a slippery slope, isn't it? It makes you wonder, who can you trust? Where do you draw the line?
It's a tough question, and there are no easy answers. It raises fundamental questions about the role of private companies in national security and the boundaries of acceptable behavior in cyberspace. It's a gray area, and it's only getting grayer.
And as technology continues to advance and the lines between the physical and digital world become increasingly blurred, these issues are only going to become more complex and challenging. It's almost like we're entering uncharted territory.
I think that's a key takeaway from our deep dive today. Cybersecurity is not just a technical issue, it's a societal issue. It's about power politics and the future of our digital lives. It's about who controls the information, who has access to it, and how it's used.
It's a big picture issue, and is one that we all need to be engaged in. We need to have open and honest conversations about the risks, the challenges, and the potential solutions we need to demand transparency and accountability from governments and corporations alike.
Absolutely. We can't just sit back and let things happen. We need to be informed, engaged, and proactive in shaping the future of cybersecurity. It's not just about protecting our data, it's about protecting our rights, our freedoms, and our democracy.
Well said. That's a powerful message and a perfect note to end on. So to our listeners out there, we hope this deep dive has been informative and empowering. Remember, knowledge is power. And by staying informed and taking proactive steps, you can navigate the digital world safely and confidently.
Thanks for having me on the show. It's been a great discussion.
It's been a pleasure. And all of you listening, thank you for joining us on Calm Coding. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and stay ahead of the curve.